The smirk was small, almost invisible, but it changed the whole room. Judge Harold Kettering didn't laugh out loud. He was too practiced for that. He simply tilted his head, glanced at the folder in the black mother's hands, and let the corner of his mouth rise in the kind of quiet contempt that told everyone watching exactly what he thought of her evidence. Then he looked over his glasses and said, in a tone that sounded patient but wasn't, "Ms. Daniels, this court deals in facts, not feelings." A few people in the gallery shifted. A bailiff stared straight ahead like he'd learned not to react. At the plaintiff's table, the opposing attorney, white, expensive suit, confident posture, exhaled through his nose like this was going exactly as planned. And standing at the witness podium with her palms damp against a stack of papers, Alana Daniels felt the familiar heat of being dismissed before she'd even been heard. Alana was 36, black, and had been raising her 8-year-old son, Micah, on her own since he was 2. She worked as a medical billing specialist in Baltimore, the kind of job that requires you to be precise because one wrong code can cost a family thousands. Precision was part of her personality now. She didn't forget details. She didn't misremember. She kept records. Because when you're a black woman trying to protect a child in systems that assume you're exaggerating, records become your armor. She was in family court because Micah's school had filed a report claiming chronic absenteeism and environmental neglect. In plain language, someone had implied she was an unfit mother. The school social worker, white woman named Cheryl Boone, had written that Micah often appeared tired, that he frequently forgot lunch, that there were concerns about stability. Those words, typed into official forms, had triggered a cascade: a child services review, a temporary supervision order, a court hearing. Alana knew exactly why it felt wrong, because the story wasn't true. Because the absences were medically documented. Micah had asthma and had been treated twice in the ER that winter. Because he didn't forget lunch, he sometimes refused to eat when his inhaler made him nauseous. Because stability wasn't missing from their home. Stability was the thing she fought for every day. But the paperwork the court had in front of it didn't show her life. It showed Cheryl Boone's narrative. And narratives, Alana had learned, carry more weight than truth when the narrator is seen as credible and the mother isn't. She had brought evidence: ER discharge paperwork, prescription logs, attendance notes, emails with teachers, photos of their home, even a letter from Micah's pediatric pulmonologist. She'd organized everything into a binder with tabs. The kind of binder people call extra until they need one. That binder was what Judge Kettering smirked at. "Ma'am," he said, tapping his pen lightly, "I understand you're upset, but your child's school has a duty to report. You're here because there's a pattern." Alana's voice stayed steady. "Your Honor, the pattern is medical. I have documentation." Kettering glanced at the binder again and said, almost casually, "Anyone can print emails." The courtroom went still. Alana's attorney, a young public defender named Simone Park, shifted in her seat, jaw tight. Simone was good, but overworked and up against a system that moved like gravity. She had already objected twice to the school's broad claims and been overruled. The opposing attorney, Mr. Dalton Crane, smiled slightly. He stood and said, "Your Honor, the school's report is clear. Ms. Daniels is attempting to overwhelm the court with paper. But the facts are simple. The child has been absent, and the mother has not ensured consistent care." Alana stared at him. Overwhelm the court with paper, like proof itself was a nuisance. She looked back at the judge. "Your Honor, I'm not overwhelming anyone. I'm showing you the truth." Judge Kettering's expression didn't soften. "Proceed," he said, but his tone said he'd already decided how much her truth was worth. Simone Park called Alana to testify. Alana answered questions clearly: dates, times, doctor visits, school communications. She explained Micah's asthma. She explained her work schedule. She explained that she had asked the school multiple times for a 504 plan meeting and had been delayed. She explained that Cheryl Boone's home visit had lasted 5 minutes and ended with Boone standing in the doorway, barely looking around, then writing concerns. Dalton Crane cross-examined her like she was on trial for being poor. "Ms. Daniels, isn't it true you work late shifts?" "I work standard billing hours, sometimes overtime." "And isn't it true your son has been seen without lunch?" "Sometimes he refuses to eat when he's sick." "So you admit there are days he doesn't eat lunch?" Alana's eyes narrowed. That's not what I said. Crane smiled. Yes or no, ma'am? Judge Kettering didn't stop him. He loved yes or no questions because they made complex lives easier to dismiss. Alana fought to keep her voice calm. No. Crane held up the school report. The school's documentation says your child reported being alone after school on multiple occasions. Alana said, that's false. He goes to aftercare. I have receipts. Crane shrugged like receipts were feelings. We'll see. Then Crane delivered his real blow. And Ms. Daniels, isn't it true Child Services attempted to contact you and you were unresponsive? Alana's stomach tightened. I returned every call. I have call logs. Crane turned toward the judge, spreading his hands. More paper. Judge Kettering smirked again. That smirk made Alana's hands shake slightly. Not from fear, from the rage of being treated like a nuisance for insisting her child not be taken. Simone Park stood and said, Your Honor, we request the full case file, including the school's internal incident log and the nurse's report from the dates in question. We believe material documents are missing from the court packet. Crane responded smoothly. Your Honor, the court has the school's report. There is no additional material. Judge Kettering looked annoyed. Ms. Park, we can't conduct a fishing expedition? Simone's jaw tightened. It's not fishing if the file is incomplete. Kettering waved a hand. Move on. That should have been the end of it. In most hearings like this, it is. The judge makes a decision based on the cleanest narrative, and the mother walks out carrying consequences she didn't earn. But something else happened. Something small and procedural that became everything. At the side of the courtroom, the clerk, Marisol Vega, had been listening. Marisol was Latina, late 20s, and had the kind of quiet competence people rarely notice until they desperately need it. She had been clerked in Judge Kettering's court for 2 years and had learned to recognize patterns too. Which attorneys tried to slide things through, which reports always seemed complete when they supported the state, which mothers were treated like problems, which fathers were given second chances. And Marisol had noticed something from the beginning of the hearing, a gap. When she first reviewed the docket packet that morning, she saw references inside the school's report to an attached nurse incident note and an attendance adjustment memo. But those attachments were not in the file. That wasn't unusual. Files were messy, but it was unusual that Crane kept insisting nothing else existed. Marisol had looked for the attachments anyway. In the back office, among the incoming documents, she found a thin envelope marked Supplemental, Brookside Elementary. It had been misfiled under a different date. Inside was a 2-page nurse report and a 1-page internal memo. Marisol hadn't had time to bring it forward earlier. The docket was moving. The judge was impatient. But now, watching Alana Daniels being cornered by a narrative she could feel was incomplete, Marisol's sense of procedure sharpened into something else. Responsibility. Because a court file missing pages is not just sloppy. It's dangerous. When Judge Kettering smirked and said anyone can print emails, Marisol made a decision. She stood. Your Honor, she said. The courtroom froze. Clerks don't interrupt judges unless something is wrong. Really wrong. Kettering looked up, irritated. Yes, Ms. Vega? Marisol held a thin document packet in her hands. Respectfully, Your Honor, the court file appears to be missing a supplemental report from Brookside Elementary. I located it in incoming records. It includes the nurse's incident report and an attendance adjustment memo referenced in the school's filing. Dalton Crane's face changed. Fast. His smile vanished. Simone Park straightened like she'd been plugged into electricity. Alana's breath caught in her throat. Judge Kettering frowned. Bring it here. Marisol walked to the bench and handed it up. Kettering scanned the first page, then the second. His brow furrowed. His smirk disappeared. He looked at Crane. Mr. Crane, why was this not included? Crane stammered. Your Honor, I was not aware, Marisol said calmly. It was referenced in the main report as an attachment. Kettering's eyes sharpened. Then it should have been in the file. He turned to the first page and read aloud, voice suddenly more careful. Nurse incident report. Student presented with wheezing and low oxygen saturation at 9:18 a.m. Parent contacted. Student transported to emergency care. Recommendation, medical absence excused. Alana's eyes filled instantly. Kettering continued reading, slower now. Attendance adjustment memo. Absences on dates listed are medically documented and should not be counted as unexcused. 504 plan meeting requested by parent on multiple occasions. Scheduling delays noted due to staffing. The room went dead silent. Even the bailiff blinked. Crane looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. Kettering flipped the page again, scanning. This directly contradicts the allegation of chronic unexcused absence, he said, voice tight. Simone Park spoke carefully. Yes, Your Honor. It also shows Ms. Daniels sought accommodations and was delayed. Kettering stared at the papers, then looked at Alana for the first time as if she were a person and not a nuisance. His voice was different now, less dismissive, more precise. Ms. Daniels, he said, why did the school's primary report frame these absences as neglect? Alana's voice shook, but she held it. Because they didn't want to admit they failed my son, so they made it about me. Crane tried to recover. Your Honor, schools are overwhelmed. Kettering cut him off sharply. No, this is not overwhelmed. This is omission. Then he turned to Marisol. Ms. Vega, ensure this supplemental report is entered into the record immediately. Marisol nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Kettering looked at Crane again. Mr. Crane, I am ordering a review of the school's reporting process, and I want an explanation for why referenced documents were not submitted. If this omission was intentional, there will be consequences. Crane swallowed hard. Understood, Your Honor. Then Kettering did something Alana hadn't allowed herself to hope for. He changed course. Based on the supplemental report and the medical documentation provided, he said, the court does not find sufficient basis to maintain a supervision order. The petition for neglect is dismissed. Alana's knees almost gave out. Simone Park placed a hand on her back, steadying her. In the gallery, someone let out a quiet sob. A grandmother, Alana recognized from church, pressed her hands together like prayer. Kettering wasn't done. He looked directly at Cheryl Boone, the school social worker, seated behind Crane. Ms. Boone, stand. Boone rose slowly, face tight. Kettering held up the nurse report. You wrote concerns about stability, while your own nurse documented medical distress, and your own memo acknowledged excused absences. Explain. Boone's voice trembled. We acted out of an abundance of caution. Kettering's eyes narrowed. Caution is not misrepresentation. Boone looked down. Kettering turned back to Alana. His voice was still formal, but there was something new in it, recognition of harm. Ms. Daniels, he said, I regret the stress this proceeding has caused. You will receive an amended order today, and I strongly recommend the school implement a 504 plan without delay. Alana nodded, tears running now. Thank you. She wanted to add, you almost believed them. You almost took my child. But she kept it inside. She had won the immediate fight. She wasn't going to risk the system's fragile mercy by saying what was true too loudly. Outside the courtroom, the air felt different, sharper, cleaner, like she'd been underwater and finally broke the surface. Simone Park hugged her once, quick and fierce. You did everything right, Simone whispered. Alana exhaled hard. They still didn't believe me. Simone nodded. They believed the file. That's the sickness. Marisol Vega walked out behind them, holding a stack of updated papers. She hesitated, then approached Alana. Ms. Daniels, she said softly, I'm glad I found it. Alana looked at her, eyes still wet. You saved us, she said. Marisol shook her head. You saved your son. I just did my job. Alana's voice broke. Your job mattered. Marisol nodded once, accepting that. A week later, the district quietly placed Cheryl Boone on administrative review. The school principal suddenly scheduled the 504 meeting within days. Micah's absences were reclassified. A letter appeared in Alana's mailbox from the school superintendent expressing concern and commitment to improve processes. It didn't apologize, institutions rarely do. But the record had been corrected, and that was power. The thing that stayed with Alana most, though, wasn't the dismissal. It was the smirk. The moment she realized the judge had been prepared to decide against her before hearing her, the moment she understood that in some courtrooms, black motherhood enters already doubted, and it was the clerk, quiet, observant, procedural, who shifted the whole outcome by refusing to let missing pages stay missing. Because that was the truth in the end. The judge smirked at the black mother's evidence because her pain was easy to dismiss when the file told a cleaner story. Then the clerk read the missing report out loud, and suddenly the courtroom had to face what the mother had been saying all along. Not feelings, facts. And the facts didn't just clear her name. They exposed the machinery that had tried to label her negligent simply because it was easier than admitting the system had failed her child.